Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg, one of the finest debaters and rhetoricians in the Democratic Party, just had a couple of heated exchanges with Congressional Republicans in which he humiliated them on President Biden's green energy policy, record, and agenda. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have a couple of clips to look at in this video, and the first one's about 2.5 minutes long, but I think it's worth every second because Pete Buttigieg is one of the finest debaters and rhetoricians basically in modern politics, certainly within the Democratic Party, and it's always fun to watch him go up against, Fox propaganda hosts and Republicans in the House of Representatives. And with each passing month, Buttigieg, who is basically unflappable, is getting increasingly more fed up. Like, he never loses his cool, but he becomes more sarcastic, more direct. He takes control of the conversation, and I love it. And this is an exchange, a 2.5-minute exchange between Buttigieg and one of the worst Republicans in Congress, Scott Perry, who, by the way, is an insurrectionist. He tried to help Donald Trump steal the 2020 election. He refused to comply with a January 6th Select Committee congressional subpoena. Just a terrible person. So it's really fun to watch Buttigieg put him in his place. We're going to play the clip and unpack it together.
Clearly, Mr. Secretary, this isn't working. So I'm wondering, is there some point, and if you've identified some point where you will stop, where the administration will stop, where the federal government will stop this requirement and let the market decide as opposed to this central planning model and this dictatorial policy?
Well, thank you. Given time is limited, I will confine myself to addressing the factually incorrect portions of what you have said, beginning with the assertion that EV sales are going down. They are, in fact, going up.
Does that include the government sales or private sales?
Every single year,
private sales
more
or government
Americans
sales,
have purchased
Mr. Secretary?
EVs. The entire market.
The government's forced to buy them, so sales are going up. But private sector,
there are private sales too. Yeah.
I'd like those numbers.
Sure. 1.2 million EVs were sold in the U.S. in 2020.
How many government and how many private?
We'll get you that breakout, but as you know, more private citizens buy EVs than government purchases.
No, I don't.
Let me address the second factual mistake in your remarks, which was that EV costs are getting higher. They're in fact getting lower, and according to J.D. Power, have now reached parity or are slightly lower than the equivalent gas-powered car. That does include the subsidy. That's right. But the point is they are going lower.
But they're not, because we're all buying them.
Your statement that they are going up is incorrect. The third incorrect assertion you made is that sales dropped in Q1. They did not drop compared to Q1 of the previous year. Of course, if you compare them to Q4, they drop, because they always do, because car sales are seasonal. But I would imagine most people are aware of that. And
no,
fourth,
I'm talking about
I want to address
EV, Q4 to Q1. EV, not just overall car sales.
Any car sales go down Q1 to Q4 because more people buy cars in Q4. But what I'm telling you is every single year, more Americans buy EVs than the year before. And the word tailspin is just a bizarre word to use for a growing sector of our economy. We also think that since that's the way that the market is headed, we should not allow China to build on the advantage that they developed during the Trump administration, not because they're environmentalists, but because they understand the economic power of trying to dominate the EV market. We want those EVs to be made in America, and increasingly they are.
I'm happy to have them made in America, Mr. Secretary. What I'm not happy about is the mandate. The American people should be able to buy.
That brings me to the fourth and final thing that I need to challenge as being factually inaccurate, which there is no mandate. You can purchase a gas car if you want to pay gas prices at the pump, but if you don't, you can purchase an EV with our help.
I love it. And you can see Scott Perry's not an idiot. He's really not. He's not like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Paul Gosar. He's terrible. He's awful, but he has at least average intelligence. He recognized that he just got schooled there in the worst possible way. There is no elected Republican, none, in the House or the Senate anywhere. And they have, believe it or not, there are elected Republicans who are intelligent. Ted Cruz, Harvard graduate, litigated in front of the Supreme Court multiple times. I know he does an excellent impression of a moron, but Ted Cruz is not stupid. There is no elected Republican who can take on and defeat Secretary Pete Buttigieg in a debate. He's better than they are. He's smarter than they are. He's better informed than they are. He has the facts on his side. Just an absolute masterclass. And again, you notice, for those of you who have tracked Buttigieg's rhetoric over the years, like he is just increasingly more assertive. Like in the past, he was so patient, so chill. And sometimes I have this issue too, like when I go on other people's debates. Sometimes I love getting into a shouting match and exchanging expletives because it's fun blood sports. Other times, people have accused me of being entirely too patient with people. Buttigieg he took control. He's like, listen, you said a number of factual things, and when Perry tried to interrupt, Buttigieg just ran through him. He's like, no, I'm not going to let you interrupt. You said this factual inaccuracy. You said the second factual inaccuracy. You said the third thing. Then when Scott Perry tried to pivot, he's like, well, listen, I love electric vehicles. I just don't want a mandate. Oh, that brings me to the fourth factual statement that you made, which is that there's some sort of government mandate compelling Americans to buy electric vehicles. There's not. We try to incentivize it. We think it's good for the environment. It's good for manufacturing, and we'll get to that in a second as well. But if you really don't want to buy one, you can buy a gas vehicle. And that's when Perry had to throw in the towel. He was simply outmatched. There was another instance here with the chairman of this committee and Buttigieg. This one's considerably shorter, but it's funny as well.
Now, that's if all the fuel going into these EVs came from non-carbon emitting sources. Do you know how much electricity in the United States comes from non-carbon emitting sources?
Even if all of that electricity came from fossil sources, it would still be cleaner because EV engines are more efficient.
I think you need to go back and look at physics a little bit.
Okay, the physics, Congressman, are that an EV engine is 90% efficient, where even the best ICE engines are lucky to get to 40%.
But the plant that made the energy is not 90% efficient, and internal combustion engines are 25 to 30% efficient, but you've got the efficiency of the generating plant plus the losses in transmission, and don't try to make the efficiency argument. The bottom line is...
Well, I'm definitely going to try to make the efficiency argument because I think it's important.
Now,
What I love where he's like, Congressman, no, let me explain the physics to you. Love this energy from Pete Buttigieg. This is a really good opportunity, though, to segue with something we haven't talked about in a minute, which is the Biden administrations and the Democratic Party writ large, their successes with respect to the climate agenda, to green energy, okay? So Climate Power released, I'm bringing a couple of sources here, but according to a new report, the Inflation Reduction Act, which had the single greatest investment to ameliorate climate change in the history of civilization. There's no country on earth who can compete with the dollars that President Biden and the Democrats have thrown at addressing climate change and transitioning us away from fossil fuels. They said, according to a new Climate Power brief, since President Joe Biden's landmark climate and clean energy investments became law in August 2022, more than 312,000, almost 313, it looks like 312,900 new and clean energy jobs have been announced for electricians, mechanics, construction workers, technicians, support staff, and many others. The report finds that companies have announced in advance 585 new clean energy projects totaling over $361 billion in investments across 47 states and Puerto Rico. It also mentions something we've just not had time to talk about, but we really need to. It's just all the terrible acts of corruption that Donald Trump has engaged in even after he's left office, including he was basically soliciting a group of oil executives. Give me $1 billion and I'll repeal Biden's clean energy policies day one. And it's been talked about in the news. I mean, just open graft and corruption, and perhaps even illegal. It should certainly be investigated. But $1 billion he's trying to solicit from oil and gas executives. Donald Trump is promising to kill more than 300,000 American clean energy jobs as part of his $1 billion deal with oil executives, and he needs an answer for it, said Lori Lodes, executive director of Climate Power. The American people deserve cleaner, cheaper energy sources, and American workers deserve to make them here at home, but Trump is willing to inflict an economic bloodbath so oil executives can keep gouging us at the pump with no competition to worry about. Trump is siding with the Chinese government to overturn Biden's clean energy law, and if he gets his way, he will forfeit the economic future to them once and for all. They also break down some of the states. For Georgia, a red state, that's Marjorie Taylor Greene's state, 30,000 new jobs. Texas, a red state, 23,000 new jobs. Kansas, 21,000 new jobs. Nevada, 20,000 jobs. South Carolina, 17,000, nearly 18,000 jobs. The most of these jobs, by the way, going to red states under President Biden. The projection over the next 10 years is that 9 million jobs will be spawned from the Inflation Reduction Act over a decade. Massive, okay? And again, as we've talked about, and Fast and Company did this op-ed kind of going into it as well, that the majority of the investment from this, again, going to conservative states, red states, who are represented by people who opposed the very bill which brought them these jobs and this alternative energy in the first place. So it's almost like, to put it simply, President Biden and Democrats love this country so much, including red states, that they will give red states, they will create a positive economic environment for red states despite the concerted opposition of those red states' representatives to the very agenda in the first place. And we've also run into situations where elected Republicans, from Lauren Boebert to Elise Stefanik and others, have attempted to take credit for these bills. Once they actually see the benefits of it, then they try to associate themselves with it, when not only did they not vote for it, they actively lobbied against it, right? So it's just simply a fact that red states are flourishing under President Biden's leadership compared to Republican leadership, to say nothing of the Republican leadership of most red states. Whether we like it or not, most red states are poorer than blue states, less healthy than blue states, less educated than blue states, et cetera and so forth. They're more federally dependent than blue states. So not that Democratic governance is perfect, but what Pete Buttigieg kind of encapsulated in that exchange, particularly with Scott Perry, is it's good policy to try to transition to green energy. And certainly, even if you're someone who thinks that climate change is some sort of hoax, which is insane, but let's say you think that it's true, that it's not as scary as the rest of us believe it is, as the experts say it is, then shouldn't you still want to outcompete our foreign adversaries? China, as Secretary Buttigieg points out, the Chinese government isn't exactly pro-environment, right? But they recognize that this is, from a manufacturing and marketing and economic perspective, this is absolutely something they need to seize. And that's why they've tried to do it, despite their ideological opposition to green energy. They're like, to hell with it. I don't believe in green energy. I don't believe in climate change. But you know what? This is good for us financially. It's good for us economically. So they're going full steam ahead, pun intended. We need to as well. There's no good argument against this, which is why Buttigieg dominates the Republicans time and time again on this very issue. Let me know what you think in the comments.